All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We're excited to jump in today, and we're going to share with you just two philosophies around gear and equipment when it comes to preparedness. We're going to dive into the philosophy of the tactical versus practical. So let's jump in. All right, guys, so as I said, we are going to jump in today and talk a little bit about the practical versus tactical type of gear. Now, again, depending on what you're looking for, depending on your budget, the use case, what you're trying to accomplish, there may be situations where the tactical is a good way to go. But in a lot of cases, for me personally, I've seen that the practical option is where I want to start with first and foremost. But let's talk through a couple different items today and discuss some of the details around the differences between the tactical versus the practical, and again, understanding why those use cases. So one of the things we're going to jump into really quickly first is the tactical pen. So these have become very popular in the last so many years, is understanding, can I carry something with me all the time that gives me some type of a defensive option, right? If I can't carry a knife, if I can't carry a firearm, things like that, the tactical pens have become a very popular option just for defense purposes. Now, one of the things you'll notice here in most tactical pens, they are usually a solid metal body type of pen. They are usually a little heavier based on the type of pen. And then you'll notice it usually has some type of a defensive end or a pointed end that you can use for defensive purposes. You can use it for breaking glass. And there's several different options out there on the market. Now, it is still a pen. So again, it gives you an option. It's something that you can actually carry and use it for a pen purpose and gives you possibilities. Okay, so that's one option. Now, if you don't want to go buy a specific tactical pen, some of the other possibilities when it comes from a more practical perspective is to go look at maybe just a solid body pen, like a zebra pen. So zebra pens are something I've always liked just because they're nice solid pens. They're great for writing, but it also gives you a good solid body pen. So again, that can still be used for defensive purposes if necessary. It's not going to give you some of the options for breaking glass, things like that. But from a practical perspective, it still can be used for a defensive purpose. A zebra pen is one of those possibilities from a practical perspective. So let's look at options for knives. So when it comes to carrying a knife, one of the tactical options that's become very popular again is an out of the front pocket knife. So these are great, kind of cool looking knives, and they're fun to have. They are definitely giving you some tactical advantage or options when it comes to a defensive purpose in some cases. Now again, a lot of them will have some type of device on the end for breaking glass again. You've got a hole that you can put a lanyard on it if you want. So several possibilities for the out the front knife. So that's an option for tactical versus some of our options for more practical. Okay, so this is just a simple Kershaw knife, but I've really liked this knife. This is a spring-loaded or assisted knife, so I like that option because similar to the out the front knife, all I have to do is click on it and it automatically opens pretty quickly for me. So it gives me some options from a tactical perspective still. If I had to use it for a defensive purpose, I still have some of those things. It's got a nice little finger guard. It's got a little bit of jimping on the back for keeping my finger. I can use it for defensive purposes if I had to. There are lots of possibilities when it comes to more practical type of knives when it comes to a pocket knife. So that's one option. A new one I picked up recently for one of my Christmas gifts. So one of the things I really enjoy. Again, a lot of times I'll pick up knives or different things for a lot of those type of events for me because I don't necessarily want to go just buy a knife or a new type of piece of gear. A lot of times I'll get them for Christmas, for birthday gifts, Father's Day gifts. Lots of those are opportunities for me to pick up some new gear to test out, to be able to add to my equipment and things. Okay, so now the next one we're going to talk a little bit about is neck knives. And I've picked up a couple different kinds, depending on the type, depending on the type of materials. There are several options. So this is a decent little size. Now you'll notice the size of the handle. It does have some jimping on the back for my thumb. It's got the little lanyard here. This is a fairly kind of inexpensive nylon cord, so I would probably replace that with some other paracord or things. But I do like the cord in the back. Kind of gives me something for my pinky to kind of hold on to because of the size of knife. Now again, blade styles are going to be different. These are probably more what I would consider probably more of the tactical style. And then you get into some like these, which are again the Karambit. Again, very much more so a tactical style knife. Is it practical for me to carry this all the time? Probably not as much. The other option is more of a practical neck knife. Okay, so this one didn't come with any particular cordage or lanyard, so I would probably just add it on using a piece of paracord. Okay, so these again have some different locking mechanisms. You can see that kind of locking mechanism there. Not too bad for this one, but you can hear it's a little shaky. This one again doesn't really lock up real tight. So again, there's options or things that I'm not really as big on some of these, and things to consider as you start looking at different types of options. Whereas this one I do like. It actually has a very solid lockup. It doesn't wiggle a lot when it gets into the case, and I have to actually use my thumb to kind of push it out. You can hear it click. So again, this would be more of a practical knife versus those that might be considered more of a tactical knife. So again, practical versus tactical. Another big thing that's become very popular recently are the tactical cards. But again, this is what you kind of refer to as your kind of wallet card or your survival card in some cases. But this is kind of more of a tactical version or a tactical type of option versus this is something to me that is probably more of a practical option. So this is again a card knife. So this would be able to fit into your wallet, and then you would be able to take this out. You can pull out the blade, and the handle becomes part of that particular item. Okay, so the blade pops off, folds out, the card folds over. So this is more of a practical item to me. Now I can use it again if I really had to. It's not the strongest thing, right? It's kind of flimsy when it comes to the knife itself. It's not going to be very strong when it comes to a tactical defensive option. So this to me becomes more of a practical option that I can keep in my wallet, right? Now again, one of the things you want to consider, you don't want to keep that in your wallet when you start traveling. They will take this, and I can tell you that from experience when I've forgotten to take one out of my wallet when you go through the security gate. But these are again two options when you talk about practical versus tactical options. Okay, as we move up a little bit larger, this is an option for a tactical knife. Okay, so this is the TRS Titan. So this is definitely much more of a tactical style defensive knife. Not very handy when I go out into the backcountry because it doesn't give me a whole lot of options when it comes to batoning or creating fires, things like that, that this is not going to be as practical. But again, from a defensive purpose, this is definitely more of a tactical style fighting knife. And it's great to be able to have from a defensive purpose. Now again, we'll do some further reviews on some of this gear that we're talking about. So again, not a bad option if you're looking for tactical, but in a lot of cases, I can also just use a simple backcountry or more of a knife like this. This is the Ontario knife. This is the RATII. So this is to me more of a practical type of knife that I can take into the backcountry. I can use it for processing wood. I can use it for making fires. I can use it for building shelters. I can use it from a defensive purpose if I really needed to. Okay, I like the fact that it's got two different finger spots. So if I need to do some precise woodwork and things, be able to create some different things in the backcountry, I like some of the functions and the features they built into this. Again, it's a full tang steel, so it goes all the way from the tip all the way through the handle. So again, as when we start looking at knives, things that we want to start understanding or some of these different gear, we want to understand what is the practical uses for them. Am I going to be using them more in a backcountry scenario, or am I going to be using it in more of a defensive perspective? So these are things to consider as we start looking at what are the practical things that we're going to be doing versus am I going to be more of a tactical environment. If I've got a grid down scenario and I'm getting actually into a more of a defensive situation, I may want to take that with me. Most cases, if I'm just going out backpacking with my friends, my family, this is probably going to be the more practical option versus the tactical option. Let's jump into one last option. Just again, as we get into the philosophy of tactical versus practical. Where would you see this fitting? Hopefully this pops into your head as a more practical item. This is my hatchet that I've had used for camping and different things like that. Now again, I'm not going to carry this usually with me if I'm backpacking, where it's much easier to process wood with this than it might be with a larger knife even. But it's going to be much easier if I carry this in a backpacking scenario versus backpacking this in. So it's how are we going to use it? What's the use case and the philosophy of the intent of what we need that particular gear for? Now, the other option, as we talk about, is the tactical version. So this is the TRS Hawk. And again, this is more of from a throwing hawk. Would not necessarily ever take this out in the backcountry with me. It just doesn't make sense, right? It's not very useful. I mean, I could, if I really had to, I'm sure I could use it for processing wood. But from a practical perspective, that's not what the intent or the design is for this. So this is not really a practical type of item as much as it's more of design for a tactical purpose. As we talk through some of this gear, we'll talk a little bit about that philosophy of use. We'll understand why in the world would I take this versus the other as we dive into some of those more capable options. All right, guys, thanks for joining us for today. Again, hopefully you had a little fun as we dove into the philosophy around the practical items versus the tactical items. As you can see here, I like to have a little bit of both. So the tactical is not always wrong and the practical is not always practical depending on your particular scenario. So things to consider and think about as you start piecing together your kits. Things that you'll always want to consider is what's my use case, what's my family situations, what's the environment that I'm going to be using these particular items in. And this is only a small piece of those things that we can consider. All right, guys, thanks again for joining me for this short video. Hopefully you got some ideas around things that you would want to consider when it comes to practical type of gear and equipment versus tactical gear and equipment. Now again, there's no right or wrong answer specifically for this based on what is your scenario, what's your environment, what's your family situation that you want to consider as you start thinking about some of these items. If you enjoyed it, please hit that thumbs up, that like, and that subscribe button. Please share it with your family and friends around you as we continue to build this self-reliance and preparedness community. Hopefully you'll join us on our next video as I get into a little more detail around different options for pocket knives. What are some things that we want to consider when carrying a pocket knife with us? Thanks again, guys. We look forward to having you join us on future and upcoming videos.